What's up, guys? Welcome to a brand new episode of Horror Needs a Hero for the month of May.
And this month, we figured we'd pay homage to a decade that perhaps has more to do with anything we're talking about than any other. And that's, of course, the 1980s.
This is going to be a lot of fun because we're actually going to talk about Scream Factory. As you might know, I'm a big Blu-ray collector, and my favorite genre is horror.
It seems that horror fans, more than perhaps any other genre, take in their genre of choice at home more than at the theater.
A lot of horror fans have this problem, or they used to have this problem, where a lot of those niche horror titles were hard to find.
And that's becoming more and more evident in the choices being made by studios and home video releases. For movie collectors, there's no bar higher than Criterion. I don't know how to explain it to somebody who's not a movie collector. It's so much more than just the movie. If you only wanted the movie, it's restored incredibly well. Criterion releases are just the cream of the crop when it comes to home video. However, there can be an argument made that there are certain tastes that need to be had for Criterion films. A gory slasher fan may not have much to even consider in the Criterion library.
Fortunately for us, this company called Scream Factory, which is a subsidiary of Shout Factory, came around and they focused on niche horror titles, really. Some of these titles were never even released to Blu-ray in the first place, and probably never were going to be released. But thankfully, the creators of Scream Factory are horror fans themselves.
These are two Shout Factory, Scream Factory titles, and they are the next best thing to Criterion. You might as well call them Criterion for the genre. Everything that Criterion does for regular movies, Shout Factory and Scream Factory are doing it for genre films. Whether it be discovering new footage, restoring the film itself, interviews with the cast and crew, they really go above and beyond.
So CP and I, we're going to have some fun with this episode. We're actually going to pick out 3 choice releases of Scream Factory that we would like to discuss with you. I am going to talk about The Burning, The Fog, and Sleepaway Camp. Now, for these particular titles, we're not going to give you like a full-on review of the movie. You know, we'll give you a synopsis, but this is more informational. This is Scream Factory titles and what you get if you get the Scream Factory version. Because one thing that I love about Scream Factory is they not only give you great extra features, but they also give you great cover art. As you can see, there's like an updated custom artwork for the title. This is The Fog. And then they always give you on the other side, see, this artwork is actually on this too, but it's on the other side of this. They actually give you 2 different artwork choices. And so you can get the original theatrical poster right here. Because I've visited a lot of Blu-ray forums and you see all these arguments about I want the original poster artwork or I want this new custom fan-made artwork. Well, they give you both.
My next selection is Return of the Living Dead, which stars, of course, Tommy Jarvis.
Hey, asshole!
Sorry. His name is Freddy in this film. This Blu-ray is packed with special features, amongst them a 2K scan of the film, multiple audio commentaries, documentaries that are just must watch if you're into special effects at all. The FX of the Living Dead, really good documentary. Another one of my favorites is The Dead Have Risen, which is a cast documentary, and it's funny how some of them have really looked fantastic after 25 plus years. But Return of the Living Dead is it's fairly well known, but this is more about the incredible special features that they've scoured and just hours and hours of extras, just hours of it.
All right, so the first title I'm going to talk about is The Burning. This is a movie I'd never even seen before until about a year ago, and then I became interested, and one thing that caught my interest was the actual Scream Factory release. The artwork caught my eye, and I was like, wow, this sounds really cool, and it's also a camp slasher, and I love camp slashers, big Friday the 13th fan, so I couldn't resist, and I watched it, really enjoyed the hell out of it. But really, it's kind of the same type story as Friday the 13th. It's this guy Cropsey, and these kids played a mean joke on him and set him on fire by accident, and so years later, after he recoups, he comes back to the same camp and he wants revenge. He wants to kill these kids, this new crop of kids, even though they had nothing to do with it. But what I liked about this particular release of the movie, I don't even think it was available on Blu-ray before Scream Factory got their hands on it. But there is some great interviews on there. One with the main actor who played Cropsey, and then there's also an interview with the great Tom Savini. And those interviews are just horror candy because Tom goes into all the kind of ins and outs of the system, but he talks candidly about the experience of the burning and about the young actors that would later become big stars, all this great stuff.
Most of you know that I'm a mainstream guy when it comes to horror. It really takes really big word of mouth for me to check out a non-mainstream horror, or it's got to have a cult following. But in the case of Life Force, I actually gained interest through the documentary Electric Boogaloo about Cannon Productions, and I just hadn't ever heard of this Tobe Hooper film. And based specifically on the limited clips that they showed in this documentary, the film just looked like an incredible, bizarre mix of sci-fi, horror, you name it, it's just all there. Above all else, just to own the Blu-ray is one thing, but the special features that are on this disc are quite incredible. You have 2 audio commentaries, one with Tobe Hooper, the director. There are a couple of new interviews on that disc, amongst them Matilda May, who's the star of the film. And something that we used to take for granted in DVDs and Blu-rays, the trailers and TV spot for this film, which you're just not seeing as we get further and further away from DVD. The trailers just aren't a lock like they used to be. The special features are unique, but this one's just about having a Blu-ray version of this Cannon masterpiece.
Now the second movie I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite Carpenter flicks, The Fog. Now The Fog was released in the UK, I believe, on Blu-ray. I used to have that edition, and the picture quality on that one was pretty bad. The blacks were really crushed. The color was boosted way too high, but this new release was actually supervised by Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, and it looks gorgeous. The Fog has never looked better. And if you don't know what The Fog is, it's a great ghost story about these guys 100 years ago. They were on this boat, the Elizabeth Dane, and then they were wanting to come to shore, and the townspeople ransacked them and killed them. And so 100 years later, the ghosts of these guys come back and they avenge their own deaths. But one of my favorite interviews on there is the one with Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a brand new interview, and she talks about her whole career as a scream queen and what caused her to kind of put horror aside and move on to different things. And what's really interesting is she gives her opinion on The Fog, and you might be surprised by what she has to say. And it's always interesting to hear what actors and actresses of that time period have to say about everything that was going on. But there's tons of great information in this release.
My third selection is the John Carpenter classic, The Thing. Among the special features are the Dean Cundy approved 2K scan of the film, multiple trailers, the Men of Outpost 31, which is a 50-plus minute documentary. Another thing that I'd make note of is the Behind the Chameleon, the sights of The Thing. That's all about the visual effects department, and if you've seen The Thing, you know that visual effects are huge for this movie. Another disc for a well-known movie that just is stacked with special features.
And finally, the last one I'm going to talk about is Sleepaway Camp, which I think Scream Factory really brought popularity back to this movie. It always had a big cult following, but I think now more than ever, horror fans are talking about Sleepaway Camp and that crazy, shocking ending, which I'm not going to spoil for you guys. But it's also one of the most unique camp slashers because the kids actually feel like kids because they are real kids. They're real teenagers. I believe Felissa Rose was only like 12 years old when she did this movie. But this particular release has a great documentary because there are interviews with quite a few cast members, including Felissa Rose. And she talks very candidly about that whole process that she went through, what went on behind the scenes, how there was this kind of love triangle going on at the same time. And I really just dug all that stuff. Very interesting.
I have a bit of a bonus selection. John Carpenter's They Live. They have some neat stuff on the disc, like commercials that were made for the film itself. The sights and sounds of They Live feature is pretty neat too, as well as the original electronic press kit. Not to be forgotten, there's a Roddy Piper audio commentary, which is even more valuable now that he's passed. It's good to know that there's a couple of Carpenter films that get the Shout Factory, Scream Factory treatment.
So guys, that's it. That is our special discussing Scream Factory. I'm sure quite a few of you guys have these releases, but if you don't, I'd say Scream Factory is definitely worth checking out. It might be our only hope for getting a lot of these niche horror titles released on Blu-ray, and properly on Blu-ray with all the great extra features and whatever else. And I didn't even mention like commentaries, which there are tons of commentaries on all these releases. Double features. I could go on and on.
Criterion might be the class of the collector's universe, but Shout Factory and Scream Factory certainly are doing enough for the horror community.
But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of Horror Needs a Hero. CP and I can't wait to get another episode out for you guys. Anyway, guys, post down in the comments your favorite Scream Factory release. Looking forward to hearing it. Also, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and see you next time for Horror Needs a Hero.